And that gets into a cue to our brain to seek pleasure from a craving or something that reminds us of something in the past that brought us pleasure. And therein it sets off the process that can get us off of our diet. So we're going to talk about how do you recapture that? How can we actually make this very system that creates these cues and triggers, how can we hijack it to work back in our favor for eliminating the cues, at least for the most part, and actually making us be directed towards staying on track rather than coming off of it. So in order to explain how to do that, we have to get a little bit into psychology, psychiatry, about how our brain works, which goes to a very young age in what they call our learning. We learn through a reward system. It is called reward-based learning. Well, what does that mean? Have you ever seen pictures on YouTube when a little kid gets his first taste of sugar, like a little teaspoon, or you give him a candy and he's in a high chair and it's like, wow, what was that? And he just wants more of it, right? Now, if you give the same kid a taste of lemon juice or something sour, or even broccoli, the response is very different, right? You see them, they can spit those out. Well, what happens is their brain is beginning to create a hierarchy. They actually call it the reward hierarchy. It's creating values to what it tastes. Now, we do this with everything, but for our discussion, we're particularly interested in the food aspect of it. But the brain registers, there's a reward when I put sweets into my mouth. Of course, that activates a whole series of different receptors in the brain that we could talk about all kinds of technical words, but there's really no cause for it, because what we're interested in is our brain is wired to recognize this is something good. In fact, in nature, in the way we're created, usually a sweet taste is the sign that not only is this not poisonous, but it's ripe, it's healthy, and it will give us energy. So the wiring is already there. Now, when we add to it that there's so much pleasure associated with it, then that reward-based learning begins to create this hierarchy. Broccoli, not so good. Cake, cupcakes, very good. As a little kid, we learn that. Now, as we grow older, what happens, I don't have to tell you this, but it actually becomes reinforced on a social level. Now, all of a sudden, good food, tasty meals, desserts, they begin being associated with family, with friends, with good times, with comfort, people that we love all around us. And so we begin that hierarchy being re-established even more. The neural pathway is set deeper and deeper. And at the end of that path is the reward of food. Now, here's an interesting thing I'd like to share with you from the book. Let's see. This is the guy who wrote Atomic Habits, James Clear, and he talks about psychiatry and the thing that they call the habit loop. I'll just kind of show you, I don't know if this will come through all right, but you might be able to see the diagram. Basically, it's even biblical too. A desire or a craving, once it's thought about, it becomes fertile, and then that, of course, gives birth to action. And if you're speaking morally, according to James chapter 1, it could even result in us making a wrong decision and even becoming an action or sin, as James puts it. And of course, that's not good. So biblically, it's there. The principle is there. Psychiatry itself supports this, and the psychology of the wiring of our brain. We get a cue, we get a trigger. If we continue to think and to desire it, then we go through the loop where now we cross a threshold where we begin to enact the behavior that will bring us to the reward. Many times that's innocent enough in our dieting, and many times it brings us a pleasure. The cue, the behavior, and we get eventually the reward. But notice what James Clear says, this author says, all behavior is driven by the desire to solve a problem. Sometimes the problem is that you notice something good, cupcake, dessert. something you see on a sign, any cue, anywhere, any smell, any memory, any visual can set that cue off. And now you desire this and you want to obtain it. Now, this is interesting. And we'll get into this a little bit, psychology. Sometimes the problem is that you are experiencing pain and you want to relieve it. Either way, the purpose of every habit is to solve the problem you face. So the patterns are established. Think of a meadow where a rabbit runs to the water, where he goes from his hole to the water. The more he goes over that pattern, the deeper the groove is set. So we create neural pathways, and we're kind of cursed in the way because we do it on the one hand because we want something good, as James Clear mentions, but at other times we may want to lessen pain that we're experiencing. In the research that I was doing and some of the psychologists with Yale University and some of the studies that they did, they mentioned an 8-year-old girl who was abused. And from that point on, she just sought to fill the void in her feelings and her anxiety she would begin eating eventually whole pizzas 20 out of 24 days. And when she finally came to see for therapy, she was obese and her whole identity was shifted about who she was and her value and so forth. So something like an abuse can become another pathway, a neural pathway that we seek to solve. Now, some of us, it may not be that bad. Maybe some of us, perhaps we go through stress or duress, and we're like the other woman that I looked at in an interview, and she just wanted some comfort from the stress. And so she went back to Nana's kitchen, her grandmother's kitchen, when she would bake peanut butter cookies, and she got to lick the spoon of the peanut butter, and she sat at the table while her Nana, her grandmother, cooked. And she felt the comfort, she felt the guidance, she felt the security. So many decades later, when this woman would become stressed, she would allow that neural pathway to bring her to the seeking comfort, and she would just put a spoon in peanut butter and just sit there and eat giant amounts of peanut butter. And of course, that resulted in weight, and then that resulted in not feeling good about herself, uncomfortableness. You know the vicious cycle, and so what happens? So that gives us an idea of why things happened. It's wired to us. It's the way we learned. It's the seeking for more reward, and it's also seeking a release or a lessening of discomfort or even serious emotional pain. Now that leaves us the question, how do we fix that? How do we now get this system to work for us? Well, one of the things that is mentioned in here, let me get this cue craving. When you think of where we can still make a difference, it reminded me of Aubrey and I knows it, and I'm sure many of you do. There's a formula, an equation that we all live by, and it goes something like this, which helps reveal where the answer is. There is an event plus your response will equal the outcome in your life. The point is, we can never influence the event. You can't help it if somebody comes to your door with a bunch of cupcakes and a relative drops in to visit or something, or if you're out somewhere and the smell or aroma brings you back, and now the cue has been made. But now one of the therapies is called mindfulness. It basically is to be in the moment and say, wait a minute, what am I going to do with this event that has now arisen? What am I going to respond? How will I respond? Will it just be an automatic response where I don't think about it, where I'm not mindful of what I'm about to do, and I just let that habit loop go, and then the behavior, once the behavior is enacted, you get the reward, but you also get the consequences. So one of the therapies, and if you're writing this down, there is an app. I'll give you the name. They learned a lot when they were helping people drop the cigarette habit and the addiction. So they applied these same principles to eating, and they created an app. They had one for cigarettes, but this is called Eat Right Now. I didn't check out the price, but some of the studies from Yale University talk about how effective this is to just use the app to help you become mindful and go through a series of questions such as, do I really need to eat this now? What am I hoping to gain from this? questions that help you become mindful so that you can actually enact and make a difference. So that was one of the recommended cures or ways to make the system work for you. Now, here's the second one. And this reminded me of Tony Robbins when he talked a lot about LNP or NLP, neuro linguistic programming. And basically, he was on to something, because what it has to do with, and many of us who are students of the Bible, this comes up too, is you can reframe what you consider the reward and its value in its hierarchy. For example, yes, this may be pleasurable. This cupcake may be awesome for its sugary content and what it does to your brain. But if you ask yourself the question, what is the result going to do for me? Is it going to help me with my goal? So rather than, like, for example, looking at that as something as you desire, if you can reframe your perception, if you can begin to look at this, I'll give you an example. Let's use me as an example, because I'm working on this when it comes to my old friend, Johnny Walker. My old me, my identity associated a drink of scotch with relaxing, a way to enjoy some less anxiety and so forth. But now if I look at that bottle of scotch and I say, you're no friend, Mr. Johnny Walker, you're a saboteur. You're a hypocritical friend, because in the end, what you're going to do is take me off of my diet. You're the enemy. You're going to be the disruptor of my routine. You're going to make me feel good and lower my inhibitions. And then I'm going to want something else that, see, now all of a sudden that little glass of scotch is not going to be relaxing. Now I realize, or I've reframed what it means to me. It's not a reward, it's an attack on who I am, because I'm not the guy that's just going to lose weight. I'm the guy that doesn't eat things or drink things that are no longer good for me. So here's what we recommend. It gets into your why, your identity. Who are you really? Are you somebody that's just on a diet that wants to lose a few pounds? Or is your identity now associated with, I am a healthy person. I go after what I want. I control my life. It's not, I am not the victim of habits or thoughts or processes that I cannot control. So that was really the two major areas to eliminate. I'll give you an example. If you're looking at the cue, you reframe it. You can remove the cues from your house, the foods that are your weaknesses. You can remove the people and places you may go to, or prepare in advance, mentally and even physically. Get full, be prepared for what cues may come your way. As far as the craving goes, reframe what it really means to you. Create a new neural pathway. Our brains are what they call neuroplasticity. So they're malleable. We can create new grooves if we move the needle off the old rabbit path and put it on the new one, and now start associating our new identity and our health with this new habit and this new action. And as far as the reward goes in that habit loop, see it for what it is. It's not a reward. It's an immediate pleasure, but it's long-term harm. It's a poison, it's ulcerated, it's cancerous, it's bad for you. It's going to take you out of your habits. So if you can reframe those four elements of the habit loop, then your behavior can eventually be different. Will it completely eliminate the cravings? No, but it will lessen the control, and eventually you will, with neuroplasticity, you will be able to create whole new pathways in your brain.